Okay. Good evening. Our talk today is Tourism and the Fragility of Place. It's inspired by our current exhibition, The Underside. You can see here behind us. Works by Keith Thompson and Delton Barrett, two Bahamian artists. And we are really here to contextualize the work of these two artists while also providing a platform for the sharing of experiences and knowledge within the development and tourism industries. I'm going to read a quick excerpt from our curator, Amanda Coulson's statement, just to give some context to the show and to our talk. The Underside brings together the work of Bahamian painter Keith Thompson and Bahamian Jamaican photographer Delton Barrett to look beneath the glossy surface of tourist imagery and into the lived realities of the Bahamas. Both artists employ literal gloss materials, varnish and resin, traditionally used to heighten beauty and obscure flaws. Here, that shine becomes a strategy of critique, mirroring how the nation is polished for consumption, while the fractures beneath are carefully concealed. Together, Thompson and Barrett expose what much of the Bahamian national dialogue works to conceal. Lives lived under constant pressure, identities flattened by service economies, and a nation far more complex than the paradise it sells. Whether it is a view generated by tourism, by the government, it is the desire to sell a success story, or by the expats and more privileged Bahamians who work hard to unsee. The Underside asks viewers to sit with discomfort, to recognize the cost of beauty, and to acknowledge the layered, shadowed realities that exist beneath the shine. I'm going to now introduce our three speakers for this evening. Thank you for being here tonight. First, on my right, we have Bradley Watson, who is the founder of the Woodstar Group for Sustainable Development, is an environmental scientist and sustainable development specialist, integrating concerns for the environment and our society into economic decision-making processes. He holds a master's degree in biology and another in sustainable development. Watson is a Chevening scholar, I think I said that right? And has represented the government of the Bahamas as the ambassador for youth and climate. His goal is to implement resource usage and climate adaptation patterns that capitalize on technology, policies, and economics to generate returns for the environment and the people who depend on it. Thank you, Bradley, for being here. Next, we have Kathrine Colby. Hello, Kathrine. Kathrine is an education officer at the Bahamas National Trust who holds a bachelor's in environmental science with a focus on ecology and conservation. Kathrine has dedicated 8 years to advancing conservation efforts. In her role, she facilitates hands-on experiences in national parks, develops conservation education programs, and engages people outside of national parks to learn about the Bahamas' natural resources. She is particularly passionate about science communication and creating positive educational experiences in nature for both youth and adults. And last but not least, we have Ari Wells. Ari is the Senior Manager of Outreach at the Organization for Responsible Governance, where she leads initiatives focused on strengthening governance and advancing community and national development across the Bahamas. Her work centers on equipping individuals and communities with the knowledge, skills, and confidence to meaningfully participate in civic life and decision-making processes. Through public education and capacity building, Ari works to close the gap between citizens and institutions by making governance more accessible and participatory. Her programs empower people to engage critically, advocate effectively, and take an active role in shaping their communities, thus contributing to a more inclusive, responsive, and people-driven approach to national development. We have some big hitters on the stage today. I'm just going to start with a kind of open question for all of you to kind of initiate. I think this hits home for everyone, given the pace of development currently in the Bahamas, and we can see that through construction, through crowding, through road traffic. How can tourism development protect and celebrate Bahamian culture without commodifying or displacing communities? I kind of want to look at that from both a positive and what we can do better. So how do you, as a nation, think we are currently doing, and where do we need to improve?
Or me.
Or anyone.
Somebody else go.
Hello, everyone. Heavy question to start with.
I know, just yeah.
I think it's a fine line between sharing what shapes you and selling. So like from the perspective of BNT, we want to share immersive experiences for people to come and enjoy national parks. We want them to enjoy being outside in the trees. We want them to enjoy seeing reorganisms, to enjoy being in the water, right? People always talk about foreigners enjoying the Bahamas more than Bahamians, right? We want Bahamians, because most of these parks are on crown lands, they belong to government, they belong to people. We want them to come and explore. I think we cross the line when we are willing to then mitigate damage or really change an environment for economic gain. And where you are shapes a lot of your life and who you are. And so it's like the difference between sharing like show and tell. Sharing and show and tell versus I want to sell you on this idea of a place. Because once they're gone, somehow we're left with the role of keeping them.
Yeah, I've noticed the impact, I think, growing up is the Exuma Park is a great example for me of how that's contributed to the tourism product is immeasurable. And the difference between, even growing up when there was turtle hunting and you'd see turtles on fishing docks, and to the turtle population, how it's been replenished in the Exuma parks, that is part of our tourism, right? And it's an ecotourism that I think gets left by the wayside by the sun, sand, and sea that gets promoted. But I think for me, growing up, I think for sure that Exuma Park and just what B&T has done there and throughout has been very impactful to development and to diversifying, I think, the tourism and development product as well. Yeah.
I can build on that. I think that the idea of tropicality and the idea of the Bahamas being a paradise has been plaguing this country for a very long time, because when we sell the idea of paradise, we forget that people live here. We forget that people struggle here. We're raising our families here. Right, and so we create this idyllic paradise, and then we sell it as a product. And you hear people talk about the tourism product. It's something that we have to give. It's a performance, right, of sun, sand, and sea. And even the idea of culture is something that we have to produce as a product that we have to sell. Yeah, I don't know if you all remember, there was maybe like 2 years ago, and this isn't a critique, but it's just a mention. There was a tourism billboard. It was like, tourism is everybody's business. It's still up. Okay, so it's like the idea that tourism is everyone's business itself is damaging to communities. It's damaging to the people that, we need to be able to diversify and think about other things. But instead of doing that, we're very focused on the idea of tourism. And honestly, we haven't seen much innovation from that. And now we have this product, our tourism product, that now we're raised to say this is what you need to contribute to. That's the idea that gives us stability as a country.
I would say, you quoted, what is it? This is paradise. What did, you gave a quote. You made me remember that we always say, "I live where you vacation," and there's so many levels to that. It's like, okay, I live in a beautiful place that I enjoy, et cetera, but I live where you vacation. So my job is to facilitate your vacation? Question mark. Um, so in the past with the Bahamas, I think one of the pivotal things that Pinling did when he we became independent, and he stipulated that every company coming in would be 51% Bahamian owned. And anybody can correct me if I'm quoting wrong. And
That's correct.
the product of that was that, there were some compromises made in that. Some of the Bahamian owners were not necessarily beneficial for the actual entity, the business. Some were. Some of those companies still exist and still maintain that Bahamian ownership and the benefits of that. That was one approach to Bahamianizing development. How else can you Bahamianize development? There are many ways that might be a little bit more nuanced that would allow for the benefits of the foreign investment to be maximized in this cultural context and for the people around us. How do we do that? It's a big question. But really and truly, if we were to approach every development project that was proposed to the Bahamas in the framework of how is this going to serve us in 20 years, rather than the jobs that they might promise or clearing the land. Could you imagine how much money a contractor might make clearing land for a project that might never succeed? That contractor made a significant amount of money. And so if you think about it on that level, on an individual level, there are people benefiting from all sorts of development, any sort of development. But if we're thinking of us as a whole, as a community, I think we have to change the questions that we ask.
And I guess to add to that, I think from an org perspective, what we've seen is that a lot of these decisions are made without the people who are affected actually being a part of the process. And so now we have these big developments that come in and they say, this is what we're going to do. But a lot of times, Bahamians are able to say whether or not the development is even going to work. But because you do not include the Bahamian perspective, then we're not able to sit at that table and say, hey, this is a great idea. This is what we need from these developments in order for this to work in the first place. And so when we talk about how do we really benefit people, we need to talk about how we get Bahamians to have a seat at the table first.
And how do you think we can develop these partnerships between private and public in order to kind of prioritize community benefits and transparency and, protection of the environment and tree tagging? And, I think it's very complex from each of your perspectives, but how can we, what can we do to prioritize those partnerships?
I think you can look at it through the lens of corporate responsibility funding.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at it through the idea of valuing those who will not only be affected, but most likely also be running whatever is being established. Money talks, and it can talk in a great way or a not so great way. And I think looking from a conservation perspective, conservation is always like a long-term plan. It is not normally quick, super fast gratification. Like, you're not going to see the return on your investment potentially for a decade, 50 years, maybe 100 years, depending on what you're either trying to protect or what you're trying to restore. And so there's a lot of value in going to those around that community and saying, what do you know? They are the holders of the knowledge, right? The person coming in is trying to assess and develop their game plan, but have you spoken to the people who already are the holders of the knowledge and are most likely willing to share, because you're going to impact their lives in a way that may not be able to be course corrected if it's derailing them, or in a way that might enhance them beyond a quick, you can be a vendor here, or you can have a short-term or seasonal occupation. And so when you think of that through like national parks and restoration efforts or preserving what's here, how many more green spaces are we going to have in 50 years? What is the fishing industry? Because if parks are conserving the fishery species, right? What's the fishing industry going to look like in 50 years? if we continue to dredge, if we continue to disrupt habitats. And so the 33 special places that we are protecting, they're to preserve not only for enjoyment, but for functioning of the country, right? Like we can't lose all those things, otherwise we'll have to completely change our way of life, right? And that'll have impacts across
For generations.
generations.
Yeah.
From an org perspective, we have done so much advocacy around FOIA, Freedom of Information, right? And the Freedom of Information Act. We've built tools around it. We've created ways for Bahamians to advocate for FOIA themselves. Freedom of information is something that is necessary when we start to have these conversations about what does partnership actually look like. And FOIA is something that was passed in 2017, but it's not been fully enacted. And so as we continue to have these conversations, I think that FOIA really opens the door for other things like the Escazú Agreement. So we signed on to the Escazú Agreement, which is essentially freedom of information, but for environmental information specifically. And of the 33 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean that could have signed on, we were one of the first, and there's 25 that are already signed on. And what we want is to have that fully enacted, but FOIA can be used as a vehicle in order to do that. But in order for it to be used as that vehicle, we need freedom of information to be fully enacted.
That's a big one because
It is.
Because we want to, at least for me, it's important for us to talk about this outside of, if not government, politics, right? We're trying to talk about this outside of politics. We talk about this as government. Government is how we run the country. And I would say it's actually, the only way to save our culture is to battle our culture, because our culture is, we don't have an experience where the individual's voice is heard. That's not something that a lot of people can say, oh yeah, no, if I go and say this, that'll happen. No, that's not the way it works. How do we get to that place where we encourage people to actually voice their opinions, actually come to the meetings? We have town hall meetings about every development that happens, or at least most. We're supposed to have these meetings, right? But who attends?
Yeah.
And the attendance at these meetings, is it just so you can, or present a proposal to the developer? Or is it that I want to make sure that my community sees that I'm present? Or is it that I have something in mind that I want to see happen? So, you know, for us to get this to work, we need FOIA. We need to tell people about this so that people understand the power that they hold, because, you know, I mean, this is a democracy. Like, we have a
In case you forget. Yeah.
So I just want to add to that. So what you're talking about there is the degradation of public trust. And so for anyone that's not familiar, public trust is referring to the confidence that we have in our public institutions to act in our best interests. And so it's a two-way street. Public trust is the foundation of the democracy. We need to be able to trust in our institutions. When people trust in the institution, they're more likely to show up to those town halls. They're more likely to follow laws because they understand and they're a part of that process of creating those laws in the first place. And so when we start to have these conversations about who's showing up at the town hall meetings, like that's very important because there are limited opportunities now for people to get involved. And then the people who do, we really do have to question where are they coming from and why do they even have the capacity to do that in the first place? And how do we build the capacity for people that don't have it now to be informed, to educate them and make sure that when they do show up at the table, they're able to make informed decisions and come to informed conclusions.
yes.
Yeah, I guess I'll go into like an anecdote real quick. You know, I was a student working on this project down in Eleuthera and surveying this site and trying to stop a development from happening, right? And everybody could guess what that development is. And then I came back 10 years later and people were looking for jobs. The same people that I left who were jobless were still jobless. And it's like, so how am I going to come in and try to run a campaign to preserve this area when these people are hungry, right? And not to take away from their humanity, because it's some of the most human people I know, but they don't have the resources that we have. And their decision making is not informed by love of culture, love of our country, etc. Their decisions are informed by their current circumstances. So how do we bring them to a place where they could even rationalize what we're here to talk about today?
Exactly. It's like people are in survival mode, so you have to be short-sighted. You have to think about, well, I need this very short construction job that may only last like a year or so, but my family's hungry today. You're gonna tell me that I need to hold out for the long game because this is bad for the environment. But my family needs to eat right now. It's very difficult to go into a community and say, well, you need to think about the coral reefs and think about the dredging and think about the seawalls that are being built and how this is gonna affect generations. When someone is hungry right now, people have to put food on the table for their families. So when org goes into the community, that's a serious battle that we're up against because we are saying, we're trying to make the connection for people who are providers for their families. We're saying you need to care about the Freedom of Information Act when you have children home that are hungry. It's a very difficult battle to fight, but it is one that's very necessary, and why like we continue to run into each other in the field because it's like the work that you all are doing is incredible. And as a social scientist, it's really our job to then communicate that back to the community so that we can, of course, make those informed decisions and ensure that there is at least the balance between economic growth and development.
I think you hit the nail on the head, though. I think the buy-in is always challenging because if you are worried about your most basic of needs, it is going to be beyond your scope of the present moment to look ahead on something else, which is why we always say there's a particular group that supports conservation efforts traditionally. Traditionally, conservation can sometimes be called colonial, or that foreigners care more. But if my basic needs are met and I'm at the point where I can leave my country and go somewhere else and have a second residence, or if I am well enough off that I feel well supported and that my children can go and study whatever, right? I think a lot of us has fallen into the like, my options were be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, right? But being a writer was not an option for some of us. Being a philosophist, being an artist, that could be a minor. That could be something to do with your free time. Like being a linguist, absolutely not, right? And so I think that's the real challenge of like the community cares, but what capacity do I have to care right now about this if I have a really pressing problem right now?
Just another one to, we're talking about people who are maybe disadvantaged or maybe, under-resourced and thinking about their perspective on making these decisions. But I remember working on this project and we were working really hard to protect the crab population in the area. If you guys know about land crabs in the Bahamas, it's one of the most reliable food sources for an individual because you can find the hole and you have to dig into the hole, right? You're digging and you know the crab is down there. The food is there. In addition, there's no higher power that's determining whether or not you could access them, right? And this individual is like, I am content with going and collecting these crabs. I sell the crabs, send them to Nassau, I make enough money to carry me through the year. I actually don't want to be involved in what y'all have going on. And this guy is from the same community, sitting next to the guy who's like, my daughter's in university and I need this job because I need my money to be in the economy so I could transmit it to her and maintain her well-being. Those people share the same community. They have different goals, different needs. How do they sit next to each other and rationalize the situation and make the best of it? I was listening to Trevor Noah. He was talking about how people in small communities have to deal with each other's decisions more than people in our communities, right? Like, I could go to my house and I could close my door and I won't hear the music my neighbor's playing. But in some communities, if your neighbor decides to have a party, you're having a party.
You're participating.
Right. And that's what's happening on these islands. We have these places where we want to go and we would say, and there's a person who has a thriving tourism business and they, charter their boat and they do a charter every week and they make a couple $1,000s and no need for development. I don't want you here because I take my guests to that beach. My guests love that beach being the way it is. And that person has to think, what about the guy next door who doesn't have a boat, who couldn't save their money up? It's like the fractures in society are not, over these long distances. The fractures happen like right here between me and you. How do we address that?
I want to go back to what you said, though, about the option of being doctor, lawyer, etc. I think that even that is a privilege because I think that in a lot of our education system, we really groom people to be servicemen. You're going to go and you're going to be a tourism operator, or you're going to get your government job and your Honda, whatever, and you're going to be good for life. Like, that is what our education system is perpetuating. And so we're up against Bahama hosts in high schools, right? And so we look at that as like a step forward, and yes, perhaps in some cases it is, but we really have to think about what kind of education are people walking away with that they don't even think to be artists or anything outside of whatever the cultural norm is.
I'll add to that one then. I used to work in a restaurant, had these guests here. That day I wasn't serving, so I presented differently, right? Presented differently, sitting next to them, chatting. And the guest said, you know, it was in the night on a weekend or whatever, and he's like, man, there's nothing else going on right now. I'm never coming back here. And I was like, wow. You know, you wouldn't have said that to me if I was a server or if I was working right now. You think that I'm an equal and you're telling me how you actually feel. And you're also telling me what you want. And what they wanted was to have a human experience and not be catered to, right? So the moment that I had to sit there and be a human with them and find out what they were interested in, it exemplified this thing my uncle told me. He showed me this video of these people in Jamaica taking people out to the river and cooking over an open fire, and everybody interacting. No please, no bunch of thank yous, no yes sir, yes ma'am, no tips, no handout. You could come here and you could do exactly what I was going to do today anyway, and we can have that experience. There's just different ways to frame this tourist experience, because in honesty, the market doesn't necessarily want the subservient kind of portrayal.
But then we have to talk about that as well, because where does it stop? And what are we going to do about the gentrification of our neighborhoods? Because you look at over the hill communities, and at one point they were just over the hill communities. Now they're on Airbnb being sold as, what do they call it? Airbnb in an inner city community. What are you talking about? That's over the hill. Like, and now you have foreigners coming here, infiltrating these spaces. And what's left for Bahamians? What is the authentic experience of Bahamians? And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the performance that Bahamians have to embody to sell our tourism product, which, as we just said, is then being sold by the education system so that we can perform the way that they need us to then sell our country.
Trademark pending. Cognitive dissonance is a life skill. You got to be able to sit in that and be like, man, this is where I am. I mean, not saying you have to, nobody has to do anything, but what you're saying is like, it's a moment in time where Airbnb is battling with all of these hotel companies. This person has this home, the Grammy left it, I renovated it, it's on Airbnb now. I'm making that income that I wanted to make. I can renovate it, I can keep it a certain way. You know, they have these concepts in urban development where you try to put, you know, affluent kind of circles within less affluent circles, so you have that balancing. That could be one way to look at the Airbnbs, and that, you know, currently I live on South Beach, and sometimes I'm appalled because I see trash on the street and the beach right over there. I'm just like, bro, that trash is gonna go on the beach. And I'm just like, maybe if we were able to appreciate the value of where we are in a different way, and what is the thing that's gonna cause us to appreciate it in a different way? It's dirty to think that we need an Airbnb next door to help us to realize how beautiful our house is. But like, maybe that's gonna motivate us. Shoot me if I'm wrong.
I'd like to pose that goes back to the capacity of the everyday Bahamian to actually take part in our governance systems, because you're talking about pollution, you're talking about waste management. But if I'm working a 9-to-5 job, I come home, my light is off because BPL is whatever, my Wi-Fi is off. Like, I'm not concerned about the trash that's on the street. I'm concerned that I just worked a 9-hour day and now my light is off. People are literally pushed to the margins, and we're asking them to participate in a system, again, back to public trust, that they haven't seen any benefit from. And it's literally the delivery of our public services has been so poor that you cannot expect people to want to partake in the system, which is why, again, it is a two-way street, because now org wants to go back into the community and say, hey, we need you to care about this thing. There is an opportunity here for you. We need you to be educated in how you can make a difference. And that's what org does. We create spaces where people can be seen and heard and educated so that they can come to those informed conclusions and they can actually make a difference in their communities. But as it stands now, I understand why people aren't taking part in some of these systems. We've seen it in systems like that, and we're seeing it now currently with this election.
Dirty word. And how, I mean, I think, you know, diversification is kind of what I'm hearing across the board. How do we promote that entrepreneurial spirit? I mean, I think, you know, we have such a creative community, whether it's art, music, architecture, even accounting. But I think we have an enormous amount of talent. I think we have an enormous amount of talent and not enough platforms, right? And not enough outreach or incentives for entrepreneurs. How do we, I think the Out Islands is a big reach and a hard area to touch and to support. I mean, I think you have the most experience, it sounds like, in the Out Islands. How do we do that, from an Out Island perspective and locally and environmentally, creating these entrepreneurial mindsets and, facilitating that? How can we facilitate that, either privately or publicly?
Where I was living until September last year is Eleuthera. And I've spent a lot of my time in my life in Eleuthera. I love that island. You know what people say when they talk about doing business in Eleuthera right now? Everybody who wants a job have a job right now. Everybody who wants a job has a job. There's no motivation. And so then you think and you compare that to the amount of development that's slated for that island.
Yeah.
And you say, well, what is this development for? Is this to create jobs? Well, we don't have people who need jobs. Is it because we need more tourists, etc.? Well, the tourists complaining about all the development. So what are we actually doing, and who is making the decision? Who does the decision serve? There's a lot to dig into there, I mean, there's only so much development you need.
I also lived in Eleuthera for a while, and my grandmother is from Wimsaspite in South Eleuthera. Everybody who wants a job has a job, but somehow the jobs don't always seem to pay all the things. And then it's like, how many hours do you have in a day, right? We all have the same amount of hours as Beyonce in a day. And somehow the 24 hours don't seem to add up to get people by. There are some people who make it, absolutely. And there are others who, even though they have 2 jobs and then another one that they do sometimes, they're still struggling to make it. And I think the idea of Eleuthera is always freedom, which is what it means, right? Eleuthera is a very adventurous island. The type of person who's going there does not want to sit in a 5-star resort by the pool with a cocktail in their hand. Right? That person wants to drive up and down the island on a Jeep. They want to go and find some hidden beach somewhere and get lost. Right? That is the idea of Eleuthera. And so I think the visitors have bought into that. I think that is the niche market.
It's the eco-friendly branding of Eleuthera that kind of needs to extend beyond, I think, beyond Eleuthera and the Exumas into Nassau.
Can we talk about that for a second, though? Yeah. Because we're talking now about the brand that the island has of being like this eco-friendly island getaway. And the developments that are currently slated for Eleuthera are
not get into Lighthouse Point. Yeah,
those. So there's Lighthouse Point, which we're not gonna. We don't have to do that. We're not gonna do that to Bradley. But I will say that there is a $650 million development that is slated for Eleuthera that is in Governor's Harbor, which is one of the oldest settlements in the country. That is going to reroute the roads, put an 18-hole golf course. They're building a marina in Governor's Harbor, and this isn't the first time that they've done that, and it's failed before. We're seeing it now again. Org just came off of a month-long outreach trip in Eleuthera, where we were in North, Central, and South talking to people about, well, what do you know about this? How do you feel about this? What are your perceptions on this development? And honestly speaking, it came back to, this is not the kind of island that wants to have a casino, because I'm sorry, I forgot about that part. There's a proposed casino. And so now the question becomes, well, who's going to be attracted to this mega yacht, marina, casino, 300 home gated community? It's not the island life that the people of Eleuthera are used to. And it's not that, I think that the challenge then becomes back to what I was saying earlier. We're not consulting the people that are actually being affected by the decisions that are being made on their behalf. Because people did not even know about what was going on. I think it was front page of the newspaper a few days ago. People are upset because it's you shouldn't have to hear that from an NPO, which is what ORG is. You should be hearing it from your local leaders. You should be hearing it from people that are of that community. Our team flew into Eleuthera to go and talk about the development, and that's what we do, but there's only so much that ORG can do.
It should be more public knowledge, but it should be knowledge that arises from the community coming up. And the people in Eleuthera genuinely do care about the spaces that they live in and the spaces that they have great feelings of ownership over. So like, for example, Sweetings Pond that is in Seahorse National Park, like we are in the process of developing a sustainable plan for when it is reopened to the public so that those seahorses will continue to thrive in that environment, right? We want people to have that immersive experience. We also don't want all of the lotions and the sunscreens. It's a landlocked lagoon, right? Like, we're playing the game of like, yes, this is a wonderful place and you're all welcome to come here and enjoy. We also need to think like
The impact.
and people of Boots are like, I'm ready to see them now. Like, I want to go back and enjoy this space, right? And so I think that's a smaller version of a larger scale one with the development happening in Governor's Hub and even Cotton Bay. Like that one, having been a person who myself personally enjoyed Cotton Bay and going to that crescent shaped beach and then like going back and seeing, I was like, oh my, the change completely cleared out.
Yeah, we have to get aligned on our branding and how, how we're promoting, what kind of tourism we're promoting. And I get it. Every island is different. Every island has unique aspects, features. Eleuthera has that magical, blue hole kind of essence to it. But again, if we're promoting, water and sand and beautiful imagery, and then, it's really conflicting to have massive casinos and huge, and it's this balance we were talking about earlier. That the government obviously struggles with job creation and how you balance forward momentum, because obviously we want to move forward as a country, as a community, and continue to progress into contemporary society. How do we do that? Doing job creation without, steamrolling what makes us great.
Can I just add before you get into that I think that for the Bahamian people, I think that we acknowledge that development is inevitable. This is something that is going to happen. What matters now is how we go about that development. Are we practicing sustainability? Are we making sure that we are not causing detrimental harm to our environment? We are already up against climate change. We don't need to put so much pressure on these mega developments and have our environment destroyed before it will be destroyed naturally.
I was actually, before I was going to speak about what you said about the brand. So you said brand and you said brand as well, thinking about like what you're branding as. And I was thinking, what do people think about when you say Germany? What do you think about? I think about cars.
Oh dear.
What I'm trying to say, to bring it right back,
You think
what I'm
it's
trying
like
to say
how they're,
is that every country has a brand to an extent, right? I think automobile industry, that's Germany. Manufacturing is China. France, we think wine, food, luxury goods. Same thing with Italy, etc. All of these countries have a brand. How have they used it to their advantage is my question. Like, how do we use our brand to our advantage? In that we could define it specifically. We could say we are ecotourism, but a certain type of ecotourism. We are culture forward, we are people forward, etc. But when you look at Jamaica, I mean, they are branded. And I feel like Jamaicans, I had a colleague used to say this to me, like, you go to Jamaica, everybody's wearing Jamaican flags. Everybody's representing their brand with this intrinsic affinity for like who they are. I don't see Bahamians wearing the Bahamian colors every day. Like how do we take this concept, since we live in a globalized world, the economy is our life in most ways, and brands are how you recognize entities within that economy. How do you use that to your advantage?
So I think that's such an interesting question, right? Because I think we struggle with something that a lot of Caribbean nations don't struggle with. We're an archipelago. And each of our islands have their own unique, distinct flavor. They got their own culture going on. And we've always struggled to say, the Bahamas is more than just Nassau. And so if we were to find, right? If we were to find a way to unite Bahamians and include family islanders more, I think we can start to have those conversations more. But I also want to say that this goes to Jackson Burnside's dream of having people come to the Bahamas for not just the sun, sand, and sea, but for our art and our culture. That's very important as well. And it's like, when we look at the art that's being, let me rephrase, the art that has been produced has always depicted the real, authentic struggle of the Bahamian but that's not what is being consumed. It's not what sells. And so our art has been very palatable, and that is what has sold for a long time. Now we see spaces like Turn, which is relatively new, that would now put art like this up and sell this art. And that's incredible. It's an incredible effort by Turn. And it's something that I deeply respect because I love going into a gallery and being able to look at Keith Thompson's work, who is speaking to the authentic struggle of the Bahamian person. Even this painting that's right here, you literally have to take a sideways look at tourism. The act alone of going into
Quite
that
literally,
gallery in a
yeah.
contemporary art space
Yeah.
and look sideways at a burning man, like it's like we're shifting the way that culture is being consumed. And I think that that's very important when we talk about how we are going to brand our islands moving forward. Because when we see that we have to recognize what the role of the artist is, right? If we acknowledged earlier that our education system has left a gap in civic education, we have to look at art now, because art is also another way that we get people to think critically about things. You are able to develop critical thinking skills by looking at the work in the room, by reading through Amanda Coulson's essay. And so if our education system has failed to educate us and teach us the critical thinking skills that we need to imagine a world outside of the colonial ideology, you walk into a gallery and you develop those critical thinking skills, we need to acknowledge that the artist is a revolutionary. And when our art, you walk into a contemporary art space and you see this kind of work being sold, then that tells me as an outreach person going into the community that we need to get more people into the community, into this room. This is where they need to be. Not just the classroom, but here. The artist has a very big role in the revolution because it's not palatable. And it's been sold as palatable, the sea turtle, the pig, for so long, but then Turn creates a space that says, no, go look sideways at tourism. And I commend it.
On the property of a boutique hotel. Just to be really, tongue-in-cheek about it. But, it's a way in which to, cultivate a different kind of consumer, right? Obviously from a local consumer to a foreign consumer when they come down. And there's different kind of travelers. There's obviously the consumers for the big box products and the big cruise ships and things like that. But there is a discerning traveler that we're trying to tap into, and try to create those experiences, on property and specifically in Turn, to kind of change that, that concept of all these, tropical tropes and that are spread through this, the straw market too. What is being portrayed in that space? We talked about that a little bit earlier, and then you have Rasta hats with dreadlocks being sold in the straw market. Why is that? That's not our culture, but it's misappropriated and kind of just translated as like, oh, this is just Caribbean. Like that is a Caribbean thing, and that just it's a blanket statement, right?
Yeah.
Which is, yeah.
I have family that are straw market vendors, and for a personal project, I am trying to collect straw fans. And my grandaunt was literally like, "You do not want that. That is a Chinese-made fan. We're gonna go to this person, and these are gonna be the native straw fans." And like the sense of identity that we have. My aunt married a Jamaican, so her children are Jamaican Bahamian, much like one of the artists. And so like they proudly wear, and if we've had Jamaican teachers in high school, they are never ashamed of sharing. They have the little boxing gloves in their rearview mirror, or a towel, or they wrap their colors. But when we do it, somehow it seems like, oh, you're being cheesy. Like, why you, unless you're wearing black, when you talk about non-gold and aquamarine, it's like, oh, is it like Flag Day or something? Like none of those things, even that the government is trying to perpetuate to get us to buy into it. It's taking a while for us to hold on to it authentically. And when we think of it through the lens of national parks, like when you think of America, when you think of the national parks, right? When you think of Yellowstone and the wolves and the geysers, when I think of the great tall trees, right? Like other countries are able to capitalize on mountain climbing, right? Or the Mediterranean seas, and like people want to go to the Amalfi Coast, right? There are people that I meet as a person who gives tours weekly, multiple times a week. There are people who come and want to genuinely see what we value that is ours, right? Like yes, you can give the type of tour that is like, hi, I'm Kathrine, I'm super bubbly, and like, here's this cool tree, and here's this cool fish, and but I find that most of the time people value when you share. Well, this is how my grandfather fished. Like he would use broadsheads. I think these are broadsheads here in the park. This is no take zone. We're preserving it because, right? And you can create that dialogue that kind of turns the dial on conversations being had, because when they go back to their resort or they go back to wherever they're staying and they go into a different kind of conversation where it's about how can I talk the needs that you have here in this establishment, right? Like when I have those conversations with them and I talk about there is development or there are threats beyond the beauty that you see here, and we have those conversations that turn the dial on them. They start to think critically. They buy in a lot. And they're like, how can we support this here, right? And then the same thing can happen with behemoths. A lot of them come to tours in our national park, and they have no idea that this is here. People who have lived there all their life, and they'll be like, I never knew Primeval Forest was here.
Yeah.
Or I never knew Bonefish Pond was here, right? And so then they're like, wow, right in your own backyard. And then you say, okay, we've been doing this for 66 years with a conservation organization, and somehow people still don't even know what a national park is. And so we are advancing those efforts, and we're doing more outreach initiatives to try to draw people in, because once you draw them in and they're like, oh wow, that's when you've got them, and you can start to have those critical conversations.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I have one foot in the tourism industry and one foot in the art world, so straddling the two. I do see positive change in the type of traveler, right? That's frequenting the island. I mean, there are the big box, platforms that are for a specific traveler, but I do notice an uptick in a leisure traveler that wants authenticity, that is looking for these stories, is looking for these cool experiences to walk through primeval forests and understand, Bahamian flora and fauna. Like, I think it's there, and I think that it's like our job and our role to cultivate that, right, and draw that in. So I'd be curious, how you guys think in your different sectors of expertise we can harness that in a way. The authentic traveler, the authentic, investor, because I think that they're out there, and I see that changing from obviously the tourism, that more the boutique tourists, right, that are looking for different experiences. So
I was before you put us on this new train of thought, I was thinking about Lookout Key, the Lighthouse Point project, and all of that, and how.
go back.
Let me give you all what y'all brought me here for. That road used to be really bad, right? Like horribly bad, and people didn't have vehicles that could take them down that road, right? And so for me, and the other thing about it, interestingly, Bahamians don't like Atlantic beaches.
Too rough.
Exactly.
Too cold.
Too cold. Too risky.
Yeah. Too many sharks.
So the allure of Lighthouse Point didn't really strike home with a lot of local people, and that's me saying that as an outsider. So if I'm wrong, but what's cherished is called Skeleton Beach, which is in that's right in Rims's Bight. You go down to Rims's Bight. There's a cemetery there. There's the beach. There's the beach shack where the guy is selling the conch and everything. It's a good place to be. And that's the exact opposite of the North Coast. The North Coast is where the development happened. Lots of people never got to see out there. The developer came in, made a nice road. Now there's so many more people coming down there. Yes, you have to stop at the gate. You have to walk 2 miles. But the drive that you would have never brought your car down on, smooth sailing. What does that mean? There are people who never saw or never had the opportunity, never had the resources to get out to Lookout Key, who might get out there now. And now I'm calling it Lookout Key when it used to be Lighthouse Point, which is another thing for us to think about. But how does development open up access for us to these places? How does development make it something that, and how do we balance that with maintaining the authenticity, is the word we kept using? Because, I look at Lookout Key and I say to myself, man, to be honest with you, I'd be like, man, we did this and we built the community around us and we have something going on, but we did lose a little bit of something when we did this, right? There was a loss there. And for me, that loss was to build everything around. And also it was part of my journey. But for other people, that's a win. That was a success.
And I just want us to come back to the idea of nationality or belongingness, because just like you said, we're looking at these pictures and we're looking at them and saying, that's going to tell me about how I should see the Bahamas. The picture is painted by a Jamaican Bahamian, and I think he's intentional about making sure you know who he is and where he's from. So like this whole thing about authenticity and identity and all that, that's malleable, that could change. So how are we going to imagine a future that we want without carrying the burdens of, oh, I must be authentic, or I must be, from the Bahamas, or it must be this and that. How do we free ourselves to have a new future?
And it is shifting, right? Bahamians are very proud when it comes to the Olympics because we win the Olympics every year, right? We get the most medals per capita. So in our mind, we win, right? And so and we did, right? So I think when it comes around track and field, although it's a very Caribbean focused sport, right? We lock in. We're like, yeah, like Bahamians are sprinters, right? Carifta. We done went what, 6 times now, 7 times now, 8 turn and swim, 8 times and win, right? Like we are locked in and generally excited Bahamians when it comes to sports, right? We kind of locked in when it comes to the outdoors. We like to tell the stories of what Grammy did or how we was rolling outside in the summers, eating things off the trees, but we wouldn't do that now. And I don't know when my baby would do that now because I can't imagine her or whatever, right? I don't have a kid, but speaking from people who have kids, right? I was a bike kid. So seeing some of these images where like kids are like still riding bikes and like they ride them wherever. When you have a bike, you have freedom as a child, right? Like I could go wherever, leave this house at 9 o'clock. We can find some food and we can keep going, right? Like that sense of freedom. And then when you think of it through what else are Bahamians passionate about, somehow the passion shifts in a different way when it comes to government support and community support. They're still very energized, but in a little bit more of a hungry way, like this is urgent, this is pressing, right? And so all these things are being added in as we go along in the journey of culture, because culture changes, right? And I always feel like family islands preserve a lot of cultures. When you live in a cosmopolitan area, culture becomes so malleable sometimes, right? But family islands really preserve it, and hopefully national parks are a way for people to look back and also look forward. Like, can we agree that this preserves the culture of what was and how the land looked when the Lucayans were here, or how the oceans looked when our great-grandparents were alive? But this can be a way forward in saying, this is a type of space that I want visitors to come and experience, and I want them to learn what we know, and I want them to have a vested interest. And I want Bahamians to also be deeply invested in it. Because once you lose your home, what do you have, right? Then you're a nomad, right? Once you lose your sense of place, my identity is shaped by where I've grown up, right? So I have no real connection to mountains. I've been on mountains, I've hiked them, they're beautiful, they're great. I'm not a mountains girl. I want to be on the beach, or I want to be in a forest where I'm slightly scared that I'm touching poison wood because I'm deathly allergic to it and I will get a rash. But all those experiences of playing in the bush as a kid and throwing things and being a bike kid and spending all day until sunset at the beach, hoping to see a stingray or a sea turtle or dealing with a jellyfish sting or sea lice, right? All that shapes who we are. So we have to be careful, like as we add things, we don't lose too much too, right? And so hopefully conservation allows us to look back and look forward.
Yeah, as you were talking about that, I was just thinking about the amount of outreach trips that ORG has led in the Family Islands and in Nassau. And like, when we ask the question, however we ask about like, why do you care about the environment? You would be surprised at the amount of people that would defer to, well, that's tourism. That is why the visitors come to the country. This is what they come for. And so I think that there is already this like dissonance, like we're already a bit disconnected from place. It's like, you're not telling me about the Sundays that you spend on the beach. You're telling me that it's important to you because this is why people come here. And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed as well. And then also, can I just add, I think that when we think about Bahamian pride, we are a proud people. But I think that that is also a disadvantage because that is why we're pushed to the margins, especially when it comes to tourism, but it's why we accept the breadcrumbs. Because we'll say, well, we're proud. This is, we still have our national identity, but Bahamians, we're only 400,000 people. Every answer that we actually need, we already have. It's written in the NDP. We know there is a nonpartisan, independent, great way that development should be executed. And it's a document that sits on a shelf. It's something that we haven't really looked into in its entirety, and it's not something that's been enacted.
What's the NDP?
Oh, sorry, the National Development Plan. There you go. But we have the National Development Plan, which is a beautiful 500-page document that was written by some of the most brilliant minds in the Bahamas. And it's outlined the way that we should govern this country, and it's not something that's been given much attention to.
Somebody mentioned Jackson Burton. You mentioned Jackson?
I did.
Word. I was in school in Nebraska, and I think I was going home for something. And I must have been away for a while, and I went to the library, and I was looking for something about the Bahamas before I go. Imagine reading about your country in a library abroad. And that's the book I found, Jackson Burnside. And he talked about how we need to develop downtown, right? And he's telling us all these things, right? It's almost like, as a scientist, I'd be like, listen, stop collecting data. Don't collect another piece of data unless we're going to analyze it and use it. Don't write another plan until we're going to use the plan. Like, I don't need another plan. I don't need another idea. I don't need another, no. How about we go in there and do what we said we were going to do,
Right.
So, because when I think about all of these islands and the developments happening, I think to myself, I say, we need a plan that says where we're going to develop and where we won't develop. And that plan needs to be written by the people on that island, right? Like, just drop a map, color everything black that you think should never be developed, and cover everything white that could be developed, put it white. Publish that map, live by that map. That's not, I wish that was the answer, but it doesn't seem to be the answer, And then you go back to how small we are as a country. And I think about, you talk about people having pride about their nature, right? So I'm working on this site at this, development project and doing a bird survey in the bush, looking for these birds. Security guard goes by. Security guard stops his car, looks at me, says, "Hey, you looking for Kirtland's warblers?" Mouth dropped to the floor. How do you know what a Kirtland's warbler is? Who told you about Kirtland's warblers? Oh man, they used to do the drawing competition and they draw the Kirtland's warbler and they pick the best drawings and it goes into the calendar. I was like, oh yeah, the guy who brought me into working at the BNT is the one who thought about that idea, that drawing competition. He's a guy from Michigan. I've gone to Michigan carrying the drawings from the kids in Eleuthera to Michigan for us to decide which ones will be in the calendar. Bring it back. And now we're talking about this, right? And this is an individual who is like 25 years old, working on his job. He knows Kirtland's warblers. He knows that if the guy's in the bush, he might be looking for Kirtland's warblers. I indeed was looking for Kirtland's warblers. So all I have to say, the person who made that project was American, using money from the Nature Conservancy and subsequently the American Bird Conservancy to come down to the Bahamas. Those funds funded my first year at the BNT. They funded all of these programs that are happening there. And I always talk about this bird, the Kirtland's warbler. Kirtland's warbler is a bird, migratory songbird, breeds in Michigan and Ontario, spends the winter in the Bahamas. They call it an American bird. I'm happy about it because America has much more funding for bird conservation. But some of those birds spend 7 months a year in the Bahamas and 6 months in America. That's a Bahamian bird in my book. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, how do we, skillfully collect all of the resources we can to create the future that we want to see? Because I don't see it being determined by lines of where it's okay to take money from, where it's not okay to take money from. I don't see it as where it's okay to have a collaborator or not have a collaborator. Those lines, and I sit within the establishment. I've chosen that role to be the outsider inside. So you are revolution, I'm evolution, right? And the goal is for us to, at some point, come right here together.
Let me correct you. So I think that not necessarily revolution. I don't advocate for the people. I build the capacity for people to advocate for themselves. And I think that there's a difference there.
I respect the revolution. I need you to do it. Thank you.
Listen, hey, someone's got to do it. But hey, I think that that's why we're here. I think the revolution is sitting around us.
Yeah, there you go. And I think Kurtlis Walker brought a smile to my face because I'm a former teacher, like a formal educator, and I have taught the students in Eleuthera who have done the drawings and they're obsessive over it. Like, this is like a big deal to them. So if you are in junior high school and like every year you're like, I gotta draw the best bird, that's cheating if you trace a picture. Like, they are really into it. Like, I cheat so hard when I talk to, I think the 2026 calendar, now it's out. One of my students, her artwork is in that calendar, and I sent a picture back to her, and she was elated. But that type of connection and that stewardship that we do in Eleuthera, we do throughout all our islands where we have these parks, right? And so, like, when you see these kids, people think we're just teaching them facts, and then, like, they spit them out. But, like, what you're actually doing is, like, creating an experience that somehow becomes a part of them. And so, like, when they are 25 doing their security job, or when they are doing whatever they're going to do in their adulthood, right? All of a sudden, the stewardship is wiggled in there. And so it's like, well, of course we have Kirtland Walkers. Well, of course we have seahorses, and it's the densest population in the world. Well, of course we have, and the list could go on and on and on, right? Well, of course the sea turtles, the green sea turtles are no longer endangered. They're at least concerned now. Like, yay, sea turtles, right? But like, then we talked about changing culture and changing perspective. Like, that's really where it's starting to happen. And like, it can happen with adults, absolutely. But we're a little stuck in our ways. Like, once we get set, we're set, right? And so he learned that probably in primary school and junior high, right? And so like, now he's 25, right? Now you're cashing in on the investment. Now the fruits of the labor are being seen. And so it's like, that's also another way that we can help to change the culture. Yes, he's probably doing a service-based job, but he's more informed, right? And then he goes and informs his household and his community, and hopefully they're more informed. And so through a different lens, we are empowering them to be better advocates. Because if you don't know what you don't know, how are you gonna speak up about it?
So I think in summary, we've hit an hour and I want to give some time for some questions too. But I think I'd just like to hear from each of you kind of, it's clear that knowledge and freedom of information are powerful tools that we need to tap into. You know, how can our listeners be more proactive and stay informed on these new policies and seminars to progress positive actions from each of your, you know, relative sectors, from org, from NBDCO, and from, you know, as a scientist, environmental scientist, like how can our listeners start tapping into that? What are the tools?
So if it's okay, I'd like to start, and I would love to talk a little bit about the work that the Organization for Responsible Governance does. So we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We've been around for about 10 years, and our work is in building the principles of good governance and making the connections between people and governance. So we do that in a couple of different ways. We do policy work, we benchmark laws, we make recommendations to ensure that the laws that are put forward are in the best interest of the people that they're meant to serve. We also build bridges between citizen and government communication. So public participation, public consultation, making sure that people have civic spaces where they can feel seen and heard, and in that space, you know, I would say attend our events, follow us on Instagram, look at the work that we're doing, and come out. And we also do nonprofit capacity building. So we help other nonprofits like ourselves to reach their strategic objectives through teaching things like project management, grant writing, fundraising, theory of change, strategic planning. We're also a fiscal sponsor for some smaller organizations to ensure that they can reach other grant opportunities that they may not be able to by themselves. And then my domain is outreach, and so we lead engagement and educational initiatives. So I would say follow us on social media. We post our events, we post our tools and our resources. I would say come out and use the tools that are on the website, orgbahamas.com, because we do have a lot of tools that you can engage with. Last year, we led a program called Be Clear Bahamas, where we were teaching financial and fiscal literacy. And so that alone gives people the capacity to understand public spending and the national budget. And you need that in order to know or to come to other conclusions. We also have a voter education program that's going on right now. It's nonpartisan information. If you're looking to be informed and looking to learn how to analyze campaigns and analyze media. That's something that we teach. We most recently had a session with journalist Ava Turnquist. She was talking about how to analyze media. And so I would encourage you to follow us and look at the work that we're doing, because we're doing quite a lot for a small team. So please check us out. And if you ever need to reach me, my email is ari@workbahamas.com, and I'll be around if you want to get my number.
Wow. At BNT, we run so many programs. We do so much programming. And that's where my joy lies. And so I think following us on all of our social medias, our Facebook page, our Instagram, it really helps you to tap in so that you can come to our educational workshops where we're building education awareness about native plants, bush teas, native snake species. You can come to our town hall meetings where we talk about zoning for national parks. We run student programming, whether that's summer camps, internships, school-wise programs throughout the year where kids are coming on field trips. And we do the same thing for adults as well. Like, we want to bring you into the spaces, but we will also come to you. We can have corporate partners where you have lunch and learns. You go on a field trip, a little work field trip on a Friday or a Wednesday afternoon or morning, right? And so becoming a member, you're apprised of so much information as well once you become a member. And so I think people who want to get a taste of what that's like should come to our free public events, because most of our education workshops are free, right? Like, we want you to come. We don't want it to be a barrier that is created by funding, right? And then come to National Park Day. So across 9 of our islands, we're going to have National Park free and open to the public. The admission fee is waived. We want you to come and experience. That's going to be on April 25th this year. It's our Earth Day celebration that's hosted annually. And that is honestly one of the best ways to come and not only experience ecotourism, but also have an immersive experience. Be like, oh, this is a really cool place. And like, yes, there's yoga, yes, there's pottery, but like, also I just liked walking around. I liked being here. I didn't know this was here, right? And so you're like, there's fun things to do, but there's also like things that fulfill me, maybe spiritually, things that reset and relax me mentally. And once you get that taste, then come and talk with us. Don't be afraid of us when we're doing our outreach initiatives and we're in your settlement, or we're walking around and trying to get your opinion. Like, have a conversation with us, help us to gather data, so that we can go and make better decisions conservation-wise on your behalf as people.
Very cool. Very cool. Actually looking forward to National Parks Day.
Everyone looks forward to National Parks Day. Can I just say, if you haven't gone to BNT's National Parks Day, you need to go immediately. Like, go.
So where I sit right now, I am Woodstar Group for Sustainable Development, right? Woodstar is a think tank. Woodstar is my job is to facilitate Bahamians lending their talents to creating this imaginary dream we have of what the future is supposed to be. So if you wanted to work with me, it's really about having these conversations and finding ways to apply whatever your particular knowledge is to the challenges you see in front of you. So Woodstar as a group is open to you. You can join Woodstar, we can do some stuff, we can talk, and we can find ways to find projects, because the goal is to get as close to the developer as possible, close to the beginning of the development as possible, so that we can infuse these ideas and kind of open up opportunities, not just for ourselves, but also for the developer, for whoever is doing the project. And we can go along this journey together. The sooner we get to the table together, the better. And so that's what Woodstar is about. It's a group for sustainable development in the Bahamas, outside the Bahamas, Bahamian, non-Bahamian, whatever. Let's sit to the table and do it. And what I wanted to say is, individuals, if you don't want to take that sort of active role, I would say 2 things. It's okay to care. You know, there's a poem from Rudyard Kipling. He talks about, you know, we don't have to gender it, but the poem is gendered. It's to be a man, my son. But it's okay to care about something that you could see might get hurt, that you could see might be fragile or might not last as long as you do. It's okay to care. It's okay to build something that might get broken. Just go ahead and do it. The next thing is, it's important to take up space. It's important to take up space. Take up space in the national parks. Take up space at the town hall meetings. Take up space on the street. When you're walking down the side of the road and you say, hey, let's stop and pick up this trash. Take up space. So that's what I would charge everybody with. Take up space. It's okay to care. Reach out to Woodstar if you want to.
Thank you. Very motivating. I'll open it to the floor if there's any questions or questions online. Ramel. question?
So I happen to live in the US, right? So how can I'm a Bahamian, but I live abroad. So how can I, as somebody who lives in States, maybe participate? Because whatever, all of the things you guys said are really practical, and I'd like to take part, but I live abroad. So how can we get involved?
Sorry.
Hi, my name is Paige. I am a Bahamian, but I live abroad in the US. So how can I partake and be involved and engaged while living abroad?
Sure. So a lot of orgs tools are free and digital. So for example, our FOIA hub, Freedom of Information. So you can go on orgbahamas.com/FOIA, and we created a letter writing campaign where you can actually submit your letter. So you don't need to be physically in the Bahamas to advocate for FOIA or to educate yourself on FOIA using the resource hub. Our Be Clear resources are also digital. If you ever wanted to look at government spending, then you can use the tool for yourself. So there are a lot of ways for you to get involved without actually being present in the country. We do our best to not be a Nassau-centric organization. A lot of our work is in the Family Islands, and so a lot of our work is therefore hybrid, virtual, or otherwise. So if you wanted to partake in something that is digital, there are a lot of opportunities for that, whether you're attached to a civil society group and you want to be a part of the nonprofit training. That's something that you can do digitally as well.
And for BNT, I mean, you can become a member from anywhere. And that is a tangible way that supports the work that we do. We are protecting 2.2 million acres. That's a lot. With a staff complement of about 80, that's a lot. So that support is, I can't even begin to describe how much that support really goes far for us. And then also, if you stay abreast of what we're doing, you can watch town halls. They are, not all, but many of them are live stream, right? You can watch them. You can type in your question. You can email and voice your opinion, right? And so the organization will look at your questions and there will be discussions based on that. There will be, what you have to say is valuable and it is taken into account. And so that is a way to have your voice heard and help to shape what's happening without you even physically being here.
Take up space. In the Bahamas, I don't know if we harness our diaspora as well as we could. I think there are other countries that facilitate their diaspora having an involvement in the country. Brings to mind Jamaica, right? The amount of their GDP that is attributed to remunerations, or it's an R word? Remittances. Thank you. Remittances from the diaspora, significant. And Kathrine was asking you to be a part of the diaspora and give a remittance to the BNT. But other ways you can involve yourself would be speaking on social polls. There's nothing stopping you. Nobody knows you're not from the Bahamas or in the Bahamas, pardon me. And I think during Hurricane Dorian, for me, within our archipelago, like Ari was pointing out, Abaco, Grand Bahama, 3 days, no internet, no nothing. The only people able to advocate for Abaco and Grand Bahama for those 3 days were people outside of Abaco and Grand Bahama. Similarly, you have an opportunity yourself, it'll avail itself.
I have a question. It's more just about the Eskazoo and ways to interact with that. I feel like Ari, you kind of dominated that. I'm kind of interested in knowing more ways to interact with that and opening to everyone how that interacts with FOIA.
Thank you so much for that question. So for anyone that's interested in learning more about the Eskazoo Agreement, which is essentially asking for information, environmental information. If you want to learn more, org is actually facilitating an event on April 21st at the British Colonial Hilton at 6:30 p.m. And it's in partnership with the Nature Conservancy and some regional groups. So if you want to learn more about Eskazoo, there are ways to get involved now. You can just let me know, or like I said, my email is ari@orgbahamas.com. And you can reach out. I can add you to the list. It's a free event, so it's also ahead of COP4, which is in Nassau. So yeah, I'm hoping that both of you guys and anyone in the audience that's interested in the environmental space will come out. There are a lot of Latin American participants, but we've seen very limited participation from Bahamian groups. So if you're affiliated with a Bahamian group, or if you just want to come out yourself, that would be great, because like I say, it's literally in Nassau. So there's nothing that's stopping us from having a strong presence at COP4 this year.
It's really exciting that COP4 is going to be here. The delegates on April 20th will be interacting with us in our national parks here in Nassau. So that's super exciting. I think, like Bradley says, take up space. Like, don't be afraid to come out to what Oregon's hosting on the 21st, and like the conversation that you generate with those people will be valuable, right? Like, you hear their perspectives, we give ours, and we do need to take up space. Otherwise, you know, we're part of these agreements, but somehow we have a little less say. And so I think COP4 is a climate change agreement, for those who don't know. Being a small island development state, we feel all the things from climate change before the bigger countries do, but that doesn't mean that we can't lead the way in innovation and in how we want to deal with it. We can set a really good example, and I learned this in university, but like, when people from developing nations write their papers, they always say so-and-so topic for a small island archipelago, or for a small island development. Like, we like to put on the end, like, oh, this is just for us tiny people. But when people from other places write their papers, they're like, this is the state of the decline of insert whatever their topic is. And like, they state it as if that is the status quo. Like, they are the authority. And so that is another thing that going to those spaces and places do, is it helps you to say, I'm status quo. This is not, I'm just saying this for me and my little archipelago, right? I am saying that, like, when I talk about myself, I'm talking about myself, and this is the status quo. And if you bring that energy, if you will, right, you're bringing confidence, you're bringing respect, right? And that's part of the game too, is like, you have to come with the thought that like, you are confident and you are going to be respected, and like, you believe in what you're saying and what you're doing.
My mom always says, "You were born valid. You don't have to earn that." Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring it more to the art that we see around the room, particularly this photo, as well as this one. I came to the opening, and this one really struck me, I guess, because I see this every day, you know, when I drive to work. And then this one, because, you know, we all read the primary social studies book. At least I hope we did in school. But I guess my question is, what is the role of our history, I think, and how does it manifest today when we're locating on the walls, when we're thinking about development? Because, you know, in my opinion, you know, we can go on Bay Street and we can see the statue of Christopher Columbus that used to be there, not on Bay Street, but, you know, we can go downtown and we see these things. And then we're also exposed to this like modern form of colonization that you can expect or think of when you think of development that's continuing to persist. So I guess, what are your thoughts on, you know, how history has influenced what we're seeing now? How is history influencing, you know, this Bay Street photo of, you know, these guys jumping off of the ice cream parlor and tourists just walking past, or, you know, this guy raising his hand on our beach that, you know, could be taken away, and looking at this primary social studies book. So
A vacation is a temporary state. Like, nobody remembers what airports look like because they're through places. I've been to Atlanta Airport. Couldn't tell you what it looks like, right? A vacation is somewhere I go, I enjoy, and I leave. So I also drive down Bay Street every day I get to work, and people fling themselves into the street. They're on vacation. They are paying absolutely no mind. Like, cars mean nothing, traffic means nothing, but maybe we, the Bahamian people, have built up some resentment. We're a little tired that, you know, like, this is just somebody's 2-week, 5-day stuff on their 1-day stop on their cruise, right? And so you see a lot of unrest sometimes, right? Like when they're taking down the Columbus statue, like people want to make sure that like something happens that will make these people maybe wake up and see beyond the product that is being sold to them and see the everyday. And I think that's what that painting reminds me of. And so we talked a lot about different ways to hopefully push that dial and get people to have authentic conversations so they can have authentic experiences, right? And the primary school picture on the beach just also reminds me of Bahama hosts in high schools, or like from really young, like we're taught that like tourism is our #1 industry, hiking is the second, fishing is the third, right? Like, how do we get out of this? I've been fed this and I spit it out, right? This regurgitation style of education, right? Like, even Junkanoo, I'm a Junkanooer. It was my first time rushing last year, so I'm very proud to say that. Yeah, but like, it's such a wild experience being the one who like creates and like continues to perpetuate the culture, as opposed to being somebody sitting at home and watching it on their TV, or being down on Bay Street. Or like, my first time pacing was pacing for my students in Elizabeth Junior Junkanoo, and then I had to do my own costumes for the past Junkanoo season, right? And so like, all of that is a really like wild shift of like going from viewer, whether you're a tourist or a Bahamian, to active participant in like creating and continuing the evolution of culture, right? Like, the costume we wear now, my uncle, who's a former Valley boy, will tell you everybody look like chickens, but we got all these feathers on these costumes, right? They didn't always have feathers, right? And so it's changing, and so we have to think about, how is ecotourism going to change culture? How is development of more resorts going to change culture? Like, I think that is a part of it, is like feeling people's unrest, but also thinking of like, is culture something that exists outside myself, or like, am I the active catalyst for changing it and driving it in the direction that I think is best? So that was a lot.
You asked about history and our colonial history and our heritage and how it impacts us, right? History is alive, in my opinion. Right? They done throw the mace out the window twice now, or at least attempted. Right? So now, so like, imagine that day, the day when they went to throw the mace out again. I was sitting there like, man, we threw the mace out once, blah, blah, blah. And all somebody had to do was try it again. And now, mace has been thrown out twice, history's changed. History is malleable. It is happening right now. When I go to Bon Vivant's, a local bar, they have some newspaper art clippings in frames. And every time I go in there, I'm just like, when I come out of the bathroom, I'm thumping my chest. I'm like, yeah, I'm Bahamian. Yeah, we did this. 1973, there are people who are still alive who were there that day. History is alive. And who makes history? Right here. Right here. So it's the decision that you make today that changes it. And, you know, even before the talk, we were talking about how this space is a quintessentially Bahamian space. The architecture reminds us of what all of us as Bahamians, or even non-Bahamians, people who know the Bahamas, look around and see. But this architecture is colonial. You know, it's something that we inherited. And when you think about even the Spanish language, right? That's what I love about Spanish. You know, they had the Moors who took over Spain at one point, and they were occupying Spain, and they have words in the actual Spanish lexicon that were rooted in, you know, Islam. You know, history is alive. You have the opportunity to change history however you feel like doing it. You might not be here to see it actually change, but somebody will feel that, you know? So I'm not super attached to history. I'm more attached to now.
But I was just gonna add to what Bradley was saying, because it's like, when you look at art history, right, and we look at like the Maxwell Taylors, the Antonius Roberts, and all of the forefathers of art, like, you got a very specific picture of what the generation was like at the time. And now we're looking at this work, and this is what's going to define our generation afterwards. Like, we're looking at Keith, and I don't know how familiar you are with Keith's work, but I always thought that it was very interesting that he paints these Black figures walking amongst white spaces. And they're always blacked out. They're always masked. And I always thought that was so interesting. And then I saw this, like, it was the first thing when I walked, it was the first thing I saw. I was like, that's Keith's face. Like, he painted himself into this picture, and you can see him. And I think that that shows like a bit of a shift in his evolution as an artist, but also for what history is what we're making it now.
on the thing of history being alive, I love language. In my past life, or hopefully my future life, I was a linguist or will be a linguist. But like, it also shapes how you view time, how you talk about time in your given language. So for us, the past is behind us and our future is ahead of us. Oh, I'm looking forward to the weekend is an example of it. Oh, but back when I was younger, that's shaping time. But in some cultures, because of their language, the past is in front of them because it is everything that they can see already. It's happened. I know what it looks like, but the future is behind me. And so you're standing still and the future comes up from behind you and then into view. Or if you write in characters that are vertical, right? One way is the future and one way is the past. Or if you read in the language that goes from right to left, right? Or towards the east versus the west. There's so many ways to look at it, but in the idea of like history is everything that you can see and the time is moving forward and you're still, because we think we're moving through time in the English language, right? We're walking towards our future, but like, are you standing still and the future is coming in front of you, right? And so if history is alive and the past is everything we can see, we're shaping what we can't see. And sometimes that feels really scary and unsettling for us. But like, we are now in the age where we get to write our history. Like, whoever wins the wars gets to write history, and we don't have to rely on the colonizers to write history this go round, right? Like, we can write it for ourselves. The Bahamian people can write it for ourselves. So we get the choice to say, for the thing that is moving in front of me, I get to shape it. The masquerading thing is also cool with the blackout, because that's a nod to Junkanoo history. That was their one day to be free and to masquerade in spaces that were not meant for them, right? Like, Junkanoo comes from that type of culture of like, I don't really care what you have to say, I'm gonna be here.
Sorry, another question.
I just was gonna, when you talk about the whole concept of time and all of that stuff, you know, I was chatting with my dad, and I was like, man, you know what it's like when you put something there and somebody comes along and they use it, not knowing how it got there, not knowing how it'll be replaced and nothing like that. My dad says, yeah, that's what they call children. But a part of our job, what they say, it's important to plant trees you'll never sit in the shade of. Like, this whole thing about history and all that stuff, we gotta get out of ourselves. Like, I don't need to enjoy what I create. Like, I could just be happy with the idea that somebody else can enjoy it, you know? So like, this whole thing about history and time and all that stuff, you could create something and in your mind, you can imagine what it's supposed to be, and you could be just content with that and let it develop over time, you know? So that's all I want to say, yeah.
In the vein of the art again, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't just explicitly state, like, I feel like there's an overwhelming feel of like tourism as colonization in this room. Like, when I look at these, you know, he's sitting on top of Atlantis, you know, and Ari mentioned like looking sideways at this painting. I didn't even consider that. So I guess from your, you know, your environmentalist, your social scientist, environmentalist, art historian, what is your perspective, I guess, on, you know, how, and you've talked about it, about how, you know, we're taught to participate in this continuation of colonization, whether it looks like, you know, what it used to, or how it's, you know, how has it changed? Perhaps it could be, you know, refrain from answering if you don't want to. Yeah, just what is your perspective on, I don't think it's, colonization has not gone, it's apparent in the room. Obviously, we all know that. But how do you think that it's manifesting in your fields and in what you see, you know, environmentally?
There should be a seminar. I think we need.
I'm gonna buy Ari a couple of seconds. You need a second, or you good?
No, I mean, I guess I can answer. I think that there's a lot of work that's gone into, you know, understanding neocolonialism and seeing the. I think that we need to recognize the way that we are attached to colonialism, right? So I think that a lot of people have this idea that we live in a post-colonial reality because our leaders look like us. But we don't actually look at how they have internalized those hierarchies, our leaders, that is. We don't see the way that they have internalized those hierarchies, and now the way that we are relating to power is through these top-down approaches to governance. And I think that that is what org is trying to do through freedom of information. We are trying to ensure that Bahamians have a seat at the table and are informed and able to speak on these issues, because otherwise giving someone a seat at the table when they are not equipped with the correct answers, it's a bit performative. And so I wish someone did buy me the time, because yes. But when we think about what colonialism is now, we do have to look at the amount of opportunities for foreign investment that is causing our islands to be completely overrun. When we look at tourism, we're thinking about development, and we have to question, well, who are these developments meant for? And who's being pushed to the margins as a result of that? I feel like
Okay, let's be very polite. I think in the conservation world, we're trying to shake off the shadow of how a lot of conservation came to be from as early as like the first instances of people caring about the environment, creating the Exuma Keys Land Sea Park. Right, they wanted to protect the keys from development, is why the park was created in 1958, and then in 1959, BNC was established by Parliament. And so a lot of the times people who had the authority to speak on conservation issues were maybe not people who looked like me, a little brown girl. But now I think we still have that stigma of conservation is always for maybe people who don't look like us, or people who are mixed kids, right? Like they always say, oh, Caucasian girls always have that the brown crimpy hair, right? But now when you look in, I know I say that as the girl with crimpy hair, right? But like now when you look in conservation spaces where people are speaking with authority and people respect and people look to them as the experts, a lot of them are Bahamians. Like we're no longer looking outside the Bahamas to say, well, we have to bring somebody in for this, right? Like there has been a lot of capacity building done so that now the people who are the park managers, the park planners, now the people who are the experts on birding or the experts on whatever marine species or mangroves, like they are Bahamians. They are people who walk into the room and people be like, oh, you want to know about mangroves? Oh yeah, like you should talk to Lindy. Like he's your go-to guy, right? Like that's a Bahamian that we can say, oh, you want to know about terrestrial? Let's talk about Scott Johnson. Or did you talk about Giselle about birds? Like it's a shadow we're shaking off of, like Bahamians don't hold authority in conservation spaces, and like to the general public too, it's also sort of stigma of like they're coming in and taking the land, right? But it's slowly over time shifting to be more centered on Bahamians, and Bahamians, people who live here, are also people who are the experts and the authoritarians on it.
Can I just say that in itself is like inherently decolonial, us honoring the knowledge that comes from communities, that comes from the people that are local that live here.
I think my job here today is to be the counterweight to the points, right? So we're gonna go counter, and we're gonna, be risky. All right, Bob Marley say, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, right? And that's the guru there. The other guru is the poet Rumi. Rumi say, there's a field out there beyond all right and wrong. I'll meet you there. What is right and what is wrong? That's extremely subjective, extremely relative, based on the time you're in, the person you are, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a very hard time being confident about labeling things as right or wrong, colonialism, X, Y, Z. The person who initiated the idea for the Exuma Keys Land Sea Park, correct me if I'm wrong, was an American lawyer, wasn't he? No, so the thing that we're talking about wasn't a colonial affair. Literally, neocolonialism. I'm a lawyer here on business. I have the wherewithal and the connections to advocate for the preservation of this area because I see value in it, regardless of where I'm from, X, Y, Z. So we're celebrating a national treasure that was recognized by a neo-colonial activity. So why are we sitting here wondering about who was right? Like, what about, like, for right now, this is the right decision? And tomorrow I'm going to think just as deeply again, and maybe I'll have to make a different decision. But for right now, like, let's just go where we're going. The other one I wanted to say, since we talk in history, you know, our first prime minister was the quintessential African dictator. But no, seriously, the people he studied with were all overcoming a colonial heritage. He was in London studying with people like Kwame Nkrumah, all them Nyerere, all of these guys, right? They were all there studying in England at the same time, trying to figure out, how do I shake what my people went through? And he came out with this idea. I mentioned it before. He came out and he said, listen, 51% native, local, right? That's for us, XYZ. Now, do we want another prime minister to sit for 5 terms? No. But at the time, it was what we needed to do to fight the idea of colonialism. We won't do it again, but right then, it was right. So to me, it's all about make a decision, make a decision, make a decision. Serve people, do what makes sense, go to sleep happy, wake up motivated.
I think in summary, to tie it all back together as we're reached hour and a half, is again, I think this should be a seminar because I think there's so much breadth to what all of you are doing and the impact you all have. You know, what I would say is, you know, sitting in this room, and to Ari's point, that artists are revolutionaries, and they really are. You know, they are taking up space, as you say, and they are saying the hard truths, right? And they're not afraid to say it. They're not afraid to plaster it on the walls for people to see. And I think that's really important. And I would encourage our listeners, obviously, to support everything they're doing, and from an art perspective, to go to the National Gallery, to understand art history, to understand the social commentary that's been happening, you know, since in the collection, and you can see it, and to look at art and to not let people tell you what to see. You see for yourself. Again, that social commentary and how important it is. And I would say to educate yourself on what artists are doing on their front and on their part to kind of bring awareness to that. And I think that's also important to fold all these things together.
Art imitates life, and life imitates art.
Thank you. That's true. So,
Come on. That's what I learned in high school.
yeah. So I really appreciate you all so much for being here, and super informative, and I'm going to follow along for each of you in your careers. It's very inspiring what you all are doing individually and as a collective as well. You guys see each other on the ground all the time, so I appreciate it. And thank you to all our listeners and in-person questions, and thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody. Special
Thank you.